Hi, I thought I'd show you some of the records which are featured in my latest Counting the Beat B-Sides podcast, number 9. That's where I kind of dig deep into a New Zealand vinyl collection and find some of the oddities and obscurities that might not make a normal radio show. I'll put a link to the podcast here for you. This one is called That's Not Music, and it features New Zealand recordings that aren't of music. A whole range of things. Starting off with what we're listening to now, with some trains. This Steam Triumphant, really nice gatefold package. These are recordings of steam trains recorded at an event to mark the centennial of New Zealand's main trunk line. And I also have this here as well, Steam Militant. These are South Island locomotives. And there are lots and lots of these train records put out through WaihekeRecords, and I was thinking a bit about why that might be, and I suppose these records that I'm going to show, a lot of them come about in the days before internet, before online video and accessible online audio. So if you wanted a record of something, you needed a record. So a lot of stuff that you would never ever see pressed to record or CD these days was pressed up back in the right up until the 1980s, really. Also in this podcast I play a couple of records about notable New Zealanders. Man Aspiring is the story of Edmund Hillary's ascent of Everest. It's narrated by Peter Gwynn, but there's interviews with Edmund Hillary on here as well. B-side of that is some stories about Captain Cook. And another notable New Zealander who had a record dedicated to him was Labour Prime Minister Norman Kirk. So this has got the story of his life, excerpts of speeches and so on, and just a snippet of that famous song Big Norm by Ebony. One of the probably the most recent record I've got that doesn't have any music on is this art project. And this, I picked this up, I've shown this before, maybe. So this is called The Grain of the Sound and the Thing in Your Hand, Stay With Me Baby. It's an art project where the artist, whose name I'll put up, gathered together his vinyl collection and recorded all of the non-musical bits. So when you first put the record on, when it plays out, and the bits between tracks, compiled them all together and got them pressed up onto vinyl. There's 133 copies of it, with these kind of hand-bound explanations on brown paper and card, and then they were all put into these individually made plywood boxes, and and then they were given away for free. So I was lucky enough to score one of those. It's just all crackles and noise. Normally the stuff that a vinyl collector, it's the last thing you want to hear, but there's a whole record of it. There were a whole series of records released through the 50s and 60s of New Zealand bird songs. So I've got 4 of them here. There's a 3-record EP box set, Treasury of New Zealand Bird Song, and these are all recorded in the bush with little narrations ahead of them talking about the birds, being recorded in the 1950s and 60s. There's some of the comment, that wouldn't pass muster today, like for example talking about the tui and how it has one of the sweetest songs of the forest and also some of the sweetest flesh. And I think there may be a couple more in this series as well, like there's ones that focus on seabirds and so on. I'd like to get some of those, and I know there's also recordings of other things like Rotorua. Sports was a favourite of lots of non-musical records through the 70s and 80s. Wait For Me, which was a charity record for the Peter Snell Youth Village Appeal, has recordings of Peter Snell breaking the world mile record and 800 metres world record and 1500 world record and so on, with little narrations leading up to that. This is a double LP of great moments in All Black Rugby, original NZBC and Radio New Zealand commentaries from 1937 through to 1975. That was out through Music World. Actually, while we're on Rugby Records, I should show these. Winston McCarthy commentaries. This one here, Springboks in Maoriland, highlights of the 4 tests and the New Zealand University match, and British Isles versus New Zealand, highlights of the 4 tests. I picked this one up at the Regent Anything But a Book sale in Dunedin, and it wasn't until afterwards I realised that this copy is actually signed by Winston McCarthy, probably one of New Zealand's most famous rugby commentators. Sticking with sports, I've always been a fan of the kind of rhythm and pace of race commentaries. This highlights from the New Zealand racing season 1968 to 69. I picked this one up a few years ago in a junk shop in Northland, and you can hear one of those on the podcast. Comedy. So comedy, obviously a non-musical form that's pretty prevalent on record, but surprisingly I have got very, very little New Zealand comedy on record other than this, Fred Dagg's Greatest Hits. And the podcast also features a number of New Zealand poets. So I got lent this one. Hone Tūwhare reads No Ordinary Sun. Really nice, that one. James K. Baxter, Barney Flanagan. This is a double 7-inch of James K. Baxter reading his own and others' poems. And Sam Hunt, Bottle to Battle to Death. Iconic New Zealand poem with his iconic delivery. So you can check those things out on That's Not Music, Counting the Beat B-Sides number 9. Cheers, thanks for watching.